All right, welcome back. So as part of the Multifamily Innovation Council, we spend time with our partners that are building great stuff. And how this typically works is, throughout the year, as chair of the Multifamily Innovation Council, I'm spending time with multifamily owners and operators, and they're telling us what the challenges are and what problems they want to solve, what opportunities they want to create in their business unit, and also prioritization of solving those problems. And then what we do is we look out into the industry and we ask, well, who's building stuff that can either make a problem go away or create a bigger and better opportunity for multifamily owners and operators? And so we brought on our guest, Brad. Brad's here with us, Principal of Product at Flex, and excited to bring him on the show. He's going to join us at the Multifamily Innovation and AI Summit. And we've got him in here in the Innovation Lab talking about how he's creating value for multifamily companies. So Brad, welcome in.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Glad to be here.
So Principal of Product, I want to know, what's that all about? Let our viewers know like who you are, what you're working on. Let's start there.
Right, well, I'll start by just making sure our product teams aren't going crazy. So Product Evangelist, to be clear, as opposed to head of product. I don't design the product, but I love talking about it. Yep. And I've been at Flex for a little over 4 years, and honestly, I love telling our story. I love our mission. I love what we're about. I love this industry. I've fallen in love with it very quickly, only having been here, like I said, for a little over 4 years. But it's something that I and everyone that I work with are deeply, deeply passionate about.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. You mentioned the evangelists versus the product engineers and those building and innovating, through the customer experience and things like that. A lot of the companies with AI and sort of the way that pace of innovation is happening, some of these brands are coming into industry with literally product-led growth or just building something great. You think of like ChatGPT, right? We learned about that because they built a great product, right? And here you are evangelizing great products that you guys are building. And you guys are into some units, right?
Yeah, you could say that. We've had some success. We had what I called the unfortunate good fortune of coming to market at a time where not only did we have great product market fit, which obviously is just crucial in any business, but coming to market at a time where there was a huge need. I mean, we were a pre-COVID solution that really kind of gained traction and awareness more broadly during COVID, during the pandemic, when the need for financial flexibility became immediately apparent across, the country. It didn't matter who you were. I mean, even me, I have a very personal story myself of needing financial flexibility really for the first time in my adult life and having very few options, nowhere to turn. And so, fast forward to March of 2020 to September of 2020, when I found and started at Flex, for me, it was a no-brainer. I was like, man, there are people out here that need flexibility, sometimes due to no fault of their own, and sometimes due to the fact that things are just tough and tight.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. What is the product? What is it solving? And how are you guys bridging that gap in that marketplace? Yeah.
So Flex, New York-based company, financial tech company, in a kind of broad strokes picture, we're a financial wellness app that provides solutions to empower the lives of renters, to really prioritize and pay for the things that matter most, to give them flexibility over their largest, most significant recurring expense, which is rent. And it's traditionally a payment that's been due upfront in full at the beginning of the month, for all the reasons that we know why. That's just the way the model works. But there's been relatively little innovation around how to make that more flexible and do it in a way that works not only for renters, but also for operators as well.
We experience so much software in our day-to-day life, and you can pay annually, you pay monthly. There's different ways that subscription services scale operations and capture payments through innovation. And now there's even discussions around even like performance models and consumption models and things like that. And you're right. I mean, apartment rentals have been a subscription business for as long as ever, right? Like they've got this recurring revenue, and we kind of take for granted some of the things that have been in place for many years. They've worked for us and things like that. And there's, I imagine, pressure in the world today, just not even in control of the multifamily owner and operator. It's just costs are going up. It's getting harder and harder. Work is changing, pressure on the renter. and you guys are coming. I like how you positioned wellness. You mentioned it as wellness. How much does that part of the value of the organization?
I think it plays a huge role. I mean, we are, I can honestly say we are a mission-driven organization. This is a very unique company with a very unique culture. In fact, one of my favorite things to observe more broadly is, just like any go-to-market or sales organization, we have a big kickoff at the beginning of the year. And inevitably, you have new faces, new hires who are there experiencing it for the first time, and to kind of sit back and observe their experience as they see this group of folks that, like I said, are fiercely passionate about this idea of empowering renters with flexibility, with optionality, providing a better rent payment experience for operators and residents, but also to be around people that just have fun, that are kind, that are genuine. I think a former boss has put it best. He said, I don't know that I've ever been around a group of people that are more talented, but more wonderful to be with. And I think that translates into just what we do, and chances are folks listening to this or watching it have seen Flex in our booth at one of the big trade shows, and people are kind of like sucked into it. And I think it's a combination, again, of just great people, but also a product that is honestly making a difference. One of my favorite things every Monday to wake up to is one of our sales leaders will post the most recent reviews in our app store. And, it's not just like, oh, Flex is cool, Flex is awesome, like, Flex is a really nice design. It's like, no, I'm a single mom. I was literally at wit's end this month, and this flexibility made the difference, allowing me to do this for my child.
Right.
Or I unexpectedly lost my job, or there's a million variations out there, right? It's crazy, and it's very fulfilling work.
Yeah, I always look at, sometimes it's not that they don't want to pay, they may not have the ability to pay at that moment in time. And you start to think about how work is, even the gig economy, and how people even structure their income. They do need more flexibility in that aspect. You're great at the marketing side. You came from outside the industry. And the ability to do storytelling, I imagine that is part of your role. And products, the more complex they are, the more time it takes to transfer the knowledge in terms of like, this is something we haven't done before. Maybe they haven't even known about this. How do you take that approach to communicate messaging, to get people to, you kind of have this conviction, and that, and you're in the app store, you're seeing all these value that's being created. But for somebody else out there that maybe hasn't heard of this, or maybe would be considering it, like, how are you going about communicating those things?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Like I said, like you alluded to, I have a really unique journey to get here. So I like to tell people I'm a performer first and a professional second. And what I mean by that is the majority of my professional experience is actually in entertainment, live entertainment, performance, singing, musical theater, movies, film, like all those different things. And you learn a lot about the professional world of presenting by being on stage for a couple of reasons. Number one, the old saying goes like, there's just nothing like live theater. You can rehearse until you're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, once you get on stage, whatever happens, happens. And you need to be ready to kind of roll with the punches, right? The other thing that you learn really quickly is that it's not so much about how good you do something, but more, what kind of emotional experience are people having with you? So my first professional experience, we were talking about this before we went live, is I spent 6 years working for Adobe. They have a headquarters, just south of Salt Lake City, and they were all about empowering the largest enterprise brands in the world to bring digital experience to their customers. And I think that we live in an experience economy. I think that the best brands in the world, regardless of size, industry, whatever they play in, understand that experience matters, and they focus on it almost like with a level of obsession that there's just constant innovation. Like, it's never perfected. We can always be doing something a little better, tweaking this. And I think it comes down to performance and marketing 101. Do you know who you're selling to? Do you know who your audience is? Because if you don't, the market will tell you. Yeah. And sometimes that won't be so forgiving.
Yeah, no, I love what you keyed into on performance, because we have performers even on our team here. Lauren's a performer. I think everybody's a performer. And with storytelling today, I mean, you can pretty much tell your story in more places in more ways than you've ever been able to. And I feel like it's going to more of like a vibe than the story. Like, the vibe is what, you're in our innovation and AI lab, right? And that is an energy that can't be produced other than, like, let's say you're face to face in the moving. I like what you said about the live performance on a stage. I mean, you can watch it, but when you're in there, even if it's a championship game, wherever it is, like, be where you are and be with the people that you're with. And it seems like today it's the opportunity to differentiate from all the other things going on. And so you mentioned you're at your trade show booth, when people can they're just drawn into the energy. Is that the culture? Is that the team? It's the way people feel. And you mentioned emotional in there. I think there's more to these products and these innovations and these things that we're trying to tackle, where we've got to leave people feeling a certain way, vibing a certain way, like knowing, like, God, I want to be around people that are prepared, showing up to win, doing the right things, putting in the effort, caring, doing these types of things. This reflects in the product, I imagine, internally.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about, living in an experience economy. We also live in an era of authenticity. And I think that, people, they see through the fluff. I think your mission can be pure, but if it's not portrayed in a genuine, authentic way, that people are going to see right through it. And we'll be the first to admit, it's like, innovating around the world of flexible rent payments is, well, it's very simple to explain, right? It's like, we allow residents to split rent up into two smaller, more manageable payments, while helping the operators get paid upfront in full at the beginning of the month. Like, that's not hard to articulate, but putting that together has been wildly complex. We started out, I think when I joined in September, we were somewhere between 25 and 30 employees. I think if we're not already on track to be north of 300 here very soon. I mean, the growth has been phenomenal. In over 8 million units across the country, 2,000 management company partners across the country. Right. So the intricacies that are extremely complex, and I think it's just a matter of learning, growing, testing, evolving, iterating, and like I said, just being authentic along the way. Like, you're not going to get it right every time, and you know what? That's okay. Some of our best innovations have come because or partners rather have come back and said, this doesn't work for us. This doesn't work for our industry. Right. Here's how you can do it better. Perfect example. So one of the things that we offer, that we get to talk about in these product demos and sales pitches to these management companies, is that we offer an employee benefit. Mm-hmm. So anyone that works at a management company gets to utilize the service, at no cost. And what's really cool about that is, inflation, the cost of living, just the realities of today's world. Like, they're not immune just because you have a job. Right. It's like everybody feels the pressure of it. And so it was a really cool way that, again, I believe the story goes, like, it was brought to us from one of our partners saying, hey, have you ever considered offering this as a benefit? We're like, that's brilliant. Like, why didn't we think of that? Right. Yeah. Build with them, right? Like, so that's where the innovation goes, and it's never done. You guys are constantly working to make it better with the customer, not just, here, we made this, use it, that type of thing. What are you hearing inside these conversations, both in marketing or even in sales, where they're trying to understand, because you kind of serve both customers, right? So it's a huge benefit to the property owner. They're getting their rent payment up front, right? And obviously a huge value add for the resident. How do you manage the messaging with both of those audiences? Yeah, I mean, so we have dedicated teams that market specifically, to partners and operators, and then those that market more to the consumer or the end user, which of course is the resident. Sure. And this B2B to C model, which in and of itself isn't by nature revolutionary, right? Many companies have found success doing it. I think was a really interesting approach from our perspective, because again, not coming from this industry, right? Not even knowing what I didn't know coming in here, it became very apparent to me early on, though, that relationships in this industry really matter. And I think that if it's something that if you're just coming in from a tech standpoint because you're awesome and you know everything, can blindside you in probably one of the harshest ways possible, because people in this industry, more than others that I've either worked in or been involved in, they simply do business with people that they know, people that they like, people that they trust. And so, if you can combine that with a great product that also provides value, addresses pain, remedies a problem, it's a win for everybody. And like I said, one of my favorite things about my role is getting to be in these one-on-one discussions with customers, understanding that it doesn't matter if you're, operating and managing A-plus luxury housing in downtown Manhattan where rents are $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, or it's a rural part of Kansas, subsidized housing, like whatever the case may be. Financial flexibility is something that everybody wants, needs, or prefers, either in some way or at some point in their life. And like I said, sometimes it's not simply because someone's bad with money or because they're living paycheck to paycheck or something on that end of the spectrum. Sometimes it's just because it's convenient, it's preferable. And so like that's been the thing that's been awesome about working in it for me, is just being able to, like you said, learn from these partners, understanding how we fit in this complex puzzle of technology and in this industry, and being able to continually innovate and provide value to those that need it and want it.
Yeah. What do you think is the most misunderstood thing about this whole process? Are there people that even hesitate? Are they pushing back? Or what would you want others to know that maybe they don't already know?
Yeah, I love that question. So we, especially initially, our very first public trade show presence was NAA Chicago 2021, which was, again, my first trade show in this industry. And at that time, it was less about telling people how it worked, but having to even educate the market in terms of like why this was a thing. It's like, well, people can pay their rent. Like, why would they want to do it any other way, right? In fact, a great way that a friend of mine described Flex, which I wish I could take credit for because it's so brilliant, is like, we're not revolutionary, we're evolutionary. And if you look back, it's like we've evolved from cash payments to check to ACH debit and credit, and now we're not discounting any of those other payment options. We're simply expanding them, offering the flexible payment or the split pay, the alt pay. Sure. I mean, there's a million names for them out there, right?
The point is, like, this is working. We're collecting our rent. But I love the idea when you were talking about Adobe and these other brands that have done really creative things and interesting things in the world. I follow a lot of brands like that, and I can pick on a couple here. But if you picked on Tesla and you looked at vehicles, if you asked the smartest people, industry insiders in the automotive industry, they're thinking, like, how do I make the customer pay more, right? Like, how do I get financing terms and sell more cars? They're units, like multifamily units. And you have Elon Musk, who's like, hey, we have a customer relationship here. How do I increase the value of the vehicle? Not just, right, the relationship with doing things like, this thing's driving itself now, right? So I like the idea of a real estate owner and manager disrupting dominant logics, which means habits that they've formed over success. So they're patterns of how it worked, and why do you want to mess that up, right? And to something as innovative as like, yeah, we have a way to collect rent now, and it's working. But wait a minute, let's increase the value of the resident. Like, make renting more valuable. That's what you guys are doing. You're making it more valuable because you're giving them more options, more flexibility, more. Maybe they can do other things with that money in that time. I don't know. I'm not going to make those assumptions, but I love that people are making that shift in conversations with you where they're like, this is working. Why would we do it any differently? Oh, wait a minute. Now we're increasing the value of the renting experience, not just taking away purchasing power.
Let me give a great example. People are willing to pay more for great experiences. Mm-hmm. So anyone who's talked to me for 10 minutes knows that I will only fly Delta Airlines. Like I'm an unabashed travel snob. It is the experience is second to none, at least domestically when I fly. And I think that's something that people often underestimate. It's less about how do I try to like force or extract more money from someone, as opposed to like, how do I just make sure that the things that I'm offering are actually meeting their needs?
Right.
And a great example of this is we released a report with J. Turner Research a few months ago, and the whole report was around this premise of, is there a disconnect or a misalignment that exists between what operators think residents want and what residents actually value and prioritize? And one of the takeaways from that, among other things, was that they want flexibility and optionality. And we're down here in beautiful Scottsdale. I'll quote one of my all-time favorite industry folks, Linda Coburn, VP of Asset Management at Next Metro, here Arizona-based, that said it's about so much more than just offering a box to live in. Mm-hmm. It's got to be an experience. Are you providing flexibility, optionality, the basic things that, frankly, we've come to expect in every other aspect of our lives?
Right.
I mean, I remember I think it was 2020, 2021 when I had first started. A colleague of mine shared a kind of a funny anecdote. She was online shopping for like a face cream. It was like $200. Why we're shopping for $200 face creams, that's another discussion for another podcast. But the thing that was interesting is she said, check this out. And she sent me this screenshot. There were 12 different ways to pay for that face cream. And I had this light bulb moment. It's like, we live in a country where you have, 4 to 6 times more ways to pay for a luxury item than to meet your basic monthly obligation of paying for rent. And that, among other things, we're just like, man, like we need to get this out there. People need more flexibility, more options, and like I said, even the research is proving that is of great value to people.
Yeah, and the consumer's being trained by even like an Amazon or even like a PayPal, even the checkout e-commerce stuff. They're giving them different models for that, like you mentioned, in terms of getting what they want when they want it and how they want it.
Well, and to use Amazon as a perfect example of that, I think it was 2 years ago or something around that time, they offered Affirm as kind of their flexible payment option of record, or whatever the correct term is there. But meaning, like, if anything over around like $50, I think is what it is, you had the ability to split it up into smaller interest-free payments. And the example I love to use all the time for people that maybe hear about Flex and this option, like, well, I don't like have a collection issue, or like, I don't even know if people are going to use this. It's like, well, 2 things to consider. Number one, there's a high likelihood that people that are renting at your communities are probably utilizing some form of flexible payments in other aspects of their life, to travel, to pay for everyday essentials, to pay for electronics. I mean, even certain charges on your credit card can now be paid over time in a more flexible manner, right? And then when you consider kind of at a bigger level, that again, this research report kind of talks about, that it's Gen Z and millennials that are leading this global demand for flexible payments. And when you boil it down to the rental housing industry, I mean that's a demographic that's projected to be the largest demographic of renters maybe in history. Mm-hmm. And so if they're leading this outside of the industry, it just stands to reason that they're going to want, and at some point start to expect, that level of flexibility with their rent payment. I
love the way you tell that story, because it's so important, because we're making parallels to other things that people already experience in life. And for example, Alana, if you're building a car today and you make a car company, you're probably in a car every day, usually in some aspect, or you see one. I mean, go a day without seeing a car, right? And so it's pretty easy to get to the product knowledge and the fit and how you'd make it different. But if some of these owner and operators have been so successful with the purposes to create wealth, right, and then protect it, and if they're the ones making the decisions and yet they're not living in the apartment, they may be a little disconnected from this flexible payment kind of need, because maybe they themselves don't need it, right? And so they're not prioritizing that, they're not asking that question in the meetings, and it just kind of flows through. And so I love the way that but most people are buying things around the world. They're getting stuff to their home, and these types of things. And so that gives, that's a great trend to follow. And it stands to say that multifamily is a wealth creating engine, but also it has a lot of payments flowing right through that business. I mean, I can't believe it's been this long.
Well, and again, I think that's what makes Flex a really interesting company. It's kind of like it's payments meets real estate meets consumer finance, right? And so we have a really interesting perspective on a few different areas that not everybody does. And I like to say, just to put it in my own words, like, the best brands in the world make it as easy as possible for you to give them their money.
Yes.
Or for you to give them their money. And I think that is something that we don't always consider. Some of my least pleasant shopping experiences have been going to a store or paying for a good or a service with the expectation of, I'm going to use this payment option because that's what I want, or I get this benefit from it, only to find out I have to use the other one. Mm-hmm. And it's frustrating. I mean, I'm a guy that loves my points. I love to travel, and I try to maximize them in my own way. But when I don't get to pay with my Delta American Express, I get frustrated, right? And I think that's something that we can all learn, regardless of industry, is that, at the end of the day, again, people want options. They want choice. They want to be able to dictate what works best for them. And going back to your question about misconception, I think, again, oftentimes we'll come into this conversation where it's like, well, again, I don't have a delinquency issue. My renters have no trouble making rent payment. And if they did, I probably wouldn't want them in this unit anyway. And they don't step back and consider, well, maybe people want more control over their cash flow. Or what happens if they are part of that 60, 70% that couldn't come up with $1,000 in the case of an emergency, or have no emergency savings at all, and life happens? Because if the last 5 years has taught us anything, life happens, and it happens to all of us. That's just one of a million reasons why at least considering or having the conversation around an expansion of payment options is a really, really not just good and sound strategy, but frankly an easy way to enhance the experience, which, as you so eloquently put it, will ultimately lead to return value in the long run.
Yeah. Who do you want to spend time with? Is it the CFO? Is it the marketing or operations? Because, I mean, you kind of hit all of them, really. What's the ideal conversation that you want to have with somebody? Who is that in the organization?
I mean, look, you're talking to someone that sits on customer calls and sales conversations, right? Or partnership conversations, as we would kind of put it with our model. But, the short answer is, of course, you want to be in the room with a decision maker, someone that can, make this work. But I think that the correct answer is you want to make sure that you have the buy-in from anyone that could influence that decision, anyone who is affected by that. And what's interesting specifically about rent payments, it's the lifeblood of the industry. Like, you shut rent off or you affect rent, everything goes with it, right? But think about some of the indirect consequences of, if rent doesn't get collected. All of the time and energy that's spent, serving late notices, following up, having uncomfortable conversations. Even more indirect things that we don't often consider, just the strain and the stress that comes on the landlord-resident relationship. And just the toll that can take and play into the resident experience. So it's a combination of executives. It's a combination, obviously, of technical folks on the implementation side. It's not a large lift to get Flex implemented, but it does require a little bit of work that takes us all of a day or two to get set up and running in the background. But you want to make sure your accountants are happy and making sure that the integration is reconciling in a way that doesn't add burden to them.
Right.
So again, kind of a bigger answer, but all that to say is, we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and understands how, offering a tool or a solution that ultimately, serves the resident's need of wanting flexibility, complements everything that they're already doing today and doesn't add additional strain, additional workflow, and in some cases even creates some great efficiencies, which I think is probably the buzzword of the decade in this industry that everybody's looking for.
Right. So you have that executive, you're in that meeting, maybe they're walking into your trade show booth, maybe you're just walking into their boardroom, whatever that may look like. what do you want them to know? What's the high level, just short pitch product offer? What do you want them to know if you had that time?
Yeah. I mean, I always start these discussions with like, look, this is a simple product. It's pretty straightforward. We allow residents to split their rent into 2 smaller payments while doing it in a way that's operationally efficient for you. Once we get that out of the way, we've got 29 to 59 more minutes left in that conversation. Well, what are we going to fill it with? I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier. It's painting the story as to why. Because if you don't know why, it's like you could have the coolest, best thing in the whole world. No one's going to care about it. So it's like, what's the relevance to me? And I talk to my teams about this every day, it seems like. It's like we buy and we make choices based on things that don't just like look good on paper, but actually solve a need, provide value. And so again, it's an education opportunity to help them understand what are your residents actually dealing with. Even if everything's great, they've got stable jobs, like they've got good savings, like the reality still exists that there is a fundamental misalignment between when rent is due and when the other 15 to 20 expenses are due, or when cash flow comes in and how that all aligns. And our financial situations are unique and they're constantly changing. And, you could be a high earner that suddenly gets affected by tech layoffs, or maybe you're at the mercy of a commission check and it's feast or famine. Anyone that's ever worked in the world of sales, right? So I think that's where I enjoy spending the majority of my time is just informing and educating people across the country of the many, many different situations. And I know it's a long answer, but I wanted to say one more thing real quick. I think the best multifamily executives that I've had the pleasure of networking with, learning from, and speaking to are those that started out leasing apartments, which seems like a very common way to break into the industry. Yeah, the story goes, it's like, well, I was 19 and I couldn't afford rent, so like I just started leasing them. And slowly over decades, they gained experience, they rose in the ranks, and like you said, they have become not just experts of their domain that understand this industry from all levels, but they are empathetic. Like they understand what it's like to be on the front lines, both as a community manager who is having an uncomfortable conversation with someone who's struggling, and frankly, having been that resident that was struggling themselves.
Yeah, you're asked to do so many things in the role, and I don't know that that's changing at all anytime quickly. But the skills required to be on site are really fundamentally impressive. To be able to, on one end, do sales, and the other, now you're collecting, and then you got to deal with issues on site and things like that. And so, having access to the experience your customers actually go through is really interesting. And I like how you have this sort of, you mentioned the B2C part, this sort of consumer behavior stuff that you can bring into these conversations that maybe, we're so heads down in the industry that we may be missing some of those insights, and so that's a nice value.
So a friend of mine just relocated back to Salt Lake City, where he's from. He was out in Boston for a couple of years, and I was out in San Diego a couple weeks ago, and I shared this story because I thought it was kind of funny, but also really insightful. The first couple of weeks that he had moved home, every time I would talk to him, I'd say, so how is it to be back? I was expecting him to be like, oh, I love seeing the mountains. I love being close to family. But the first thing out of his mouth, I kid you not, probably 4 of the 5 times I spoke with him on the phone was, man, my management company is frustrating. And I was like, it was so interesting to me, and here's why. Because it was something that was just so directly affecting his life. Now, I've become very defensive and protective of management companies, right, working with them, right? And what I tried to explain to him is like, they have so much on their plate. They're going through so much. Yeah. And you use the site staff as a perfect example. They are often the face of the industry to the general population. And so we want to make sure we're equipping our teams with things that are efficient, that are streamlining, that are making their lives easier and more manageable so that they can ultimately provide the service that I think that's what my friend was trying to communicate. He's like, I just want to be heard. I want to be seen. I want my needs to be addressed because I chose to live here because I was clean, but they just want to feel valued.
Yeah. That's a true story. That's interesting. It's just sound, fundamental, great business advice to just get close to that experience as you can. The way some of these real estate deals are put together and more and more through funds of funds and, asset managers, you're sort of losing some of that touch where the executives, walk the properties, get down there and really, I grew up in this industry, so I scraped curbs and worked in maintenance to fundamentally understand how to build a business. And when you understand how stuff works, what it costs, what the customer has to go through, what the resident has to go through, the employee, the investor, everybody has a different perspective. One person's looking at their yield and their cash on cash, and one's looking at, is this property going to sell and where will I be next week? And then you got a resident, you got all these different dynamics going on. And it goes back to that vibe feeling that, it sounds, if I can feel it, I've just met you within the organization, that you guys have a nice energy about coming in, making life better for people, right? And then ultimately winning is helpful financially, because then you have the resources to do what you need to do to take care of your customers. So I appreciate all that impact. I know it's a lot of work. 8 million units, a lot of customers. There's a lot more to go.
That's the beauty of it. I mean, our internal mantra is, the old late Kobe Bryant quote, "Job's not finished."
Yeah.
It's like, our mission is to empower every renter across the country with the option of financial flexibility. And so, it's something that we're going to continue to iterate, to evolve, to innovate around. And, if I could leave anything, it would be with this message, is that, like, again, we get better by collaborating together. And, we're going to continue to do our best, but we're going to listen. And we're going to listen to our customers. We're going to listen to our partners. Like, we're going to try to make sure that we are providing the best possible flexible rent payment solution out there. And we can only do that by innovating together, by learning and understanding from each other. And I think that, as a general rule, is what makes this industry so awesome. Like I say, it's a relationship-driven industry. People care about each other. And I think if we can continue to foster that, like, we'll all be better for it.
Yeah. So those that want to get in touch with you, how do they go about doing that? What's the best process there?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of reaching out to Flex specifically,
yes.
I mean, so it's getflex.com is the website. And, that should tell you at a high level pretty much everything you'd need to know around who we are and what we're about. Obviously, ways to reach out via the website. As far as me specifically, I'm always open to if there's not something I can answer specifically, making sure you get put in the right hands, LinkedIn. But yeah, check us out. If there are any questions around, is this something that I should be thinking about, or why should I be thinking about it? Or, challenge me a little bit. Come out and say, hey, like, well, actually, I offer this type of housing, in this area. Because chances are we probably have partners that operate in kind of a similar space, and learn from their experience and what they've seen, and ultimately take that experience and value back to your residents.
Yeah. So before we wrap here, I always ask, what's the question I should be asking and I'm not asking?
I think as it relates specific to what we do in the realm of multifamily and rental housing, it's consider this. Ask yourself this question: Do you fully understand the reality of what your residents are dealing with in their financial lives specifically? Do you truly understand their needs, their wants, and their preferences around how, when, and where they spend their money? And I think that starts to open up a conversation, even beyond just a flexible rent payment option, but it causes you to question, how do they think about this aspect? Another takeaway from that report was around, package lockers came in second as like a really important thing to residents. And it's like, people are ordering stuff all the time, of course. And you start to take that framework and apply it to different areas. And all of a sudden you've got this experience-centric way of viewing your business that right. Again, provides a better experience and ultimately comes back to you and in droves, which is great for everyone. Yeah,
that's great. Well, this has been refreshing to spend the time, share the time with you. Obviously, we're going to continue to follow your success, continue to help educate the industry on some of the things that people are working on to create not only more financial stability for the properties, but also a greater experience for our customers. So I appreciate what you're working on, and glad to have you as a partner. And we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great experience.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.